Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the truth behind the ancient world's most powerful and influential network. You know, when you picture ancient travel, you probably just imagine a dusty trail connecting two remote towns, right? Well, actually, scratch that. The reality is a massive system that quite literally connected the greatest civilizations on Earth. It basically laid the foundation for the interconnected world we live in today. We're looking at a colossal, intercontinental exchange that ran for over a millennium, shaping empires from the Han Dynasty in China all the way to the Roman Republic.
So, this brings up a foundational question. Was the Silk Road actually just one single road? The name definitely makes you think of a lonely, winding highway stretching endlessly from east to west. But the reality? Way more complex and expansive. Actually, fun fact, the term Silk Road wasn't even a thing back then. The people who traveled it never called it that. It was coined way later, in the late 19th century, by a German geographer named Ferdinand von Richthofen. By giving it such a simple, singular name, history kind of accidentally masked this incredibly magnificent and intricate reality.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. A network, not one road, shattering the single route myth. So rather than one path, the Silk Road was actually this vast, complex web of interconnected routes. We're talking thousands of miles across the Asian continent, linking China, Central Asia, Persia, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. Think of it like a glowing, intricate grid, a massive arterial system connecting distant civilizations for the absolute first time. You had northern routes that skirted the deadly Taklamakan Desert, southern routes climbing straight through the formidable Pamir Mountains, and even maritime spurs branching out to ports in India and Arabia. Because of this, goods didn't just go from point A to point B. They passed through the hands of dozens of middlemen, from Sogdian merchants in Central Asia to Parthian traders in Persia, way before they ever saw a market in Rome or Alexandria.
Moving on to Section 2. Moving goods beyond silk. What was really in those caravans?
Now, obviously, Chinese silk was highly prized. It's in the name, for sure. But the sheer variety of merchandise being hauled across the continent was absolutely staggering. Right alongside those delicate threads, traders were packing heavy chests of pungent spices, gleaming precious metals, beautifully crafted textiles, magnificent horses, and even fragile glass. Just picture the sights and sounds of merchants loading up these incredibly diverse, valuable cargoes. The Chinese emperors were literally desperate for the powerful so-called heavenly horses of the Fergana Valley to build up their cavalry. On the flip side, the Romans were so obsessed with silk that their Senate kept trying to ban it just to stop the massive drain of gold leaving the empire. And meanwhile, beautifully blown Roman glass was making its way east, highly prized by Chinese nobility. It was this massive, totally integrated mobile economy.
Section 3. Surviving the dangerous journey. The physical toll of ancient trade. Moving all these goods? It required a profound human struggle. Merchants were braving immense golden sand dunes one week and navigating freezing Rocky Mountain passes the next. And beyond the crazy distances and extreme terrain, they were constantly dealing with the very real threat of disease and ruthless bandit attacks. If you took the northern route, you had to survive the Taklamakan Desert. And get this, that's a wasteland whose name is often ominously translated as "he who goes in does not come out." Yikes. Take the southern route, you're facing lethal altitude sickness and mountains that practically scrape the sky. And honestly, wherever the geography wasn't actively trying to kill them, nomadic raiders probably were. Merely surviving this high-stakes journey was a monumental achievement. It required heavily armed escorts and some intense logistical planning.
Because the journey was so insanely hazardous, the ancient world had to come up with a solution. Enter the caravanserai. These were historically essential roadside inns dotted all along the routes. You can think of them as vital survival checkpoints where traders could rest, safely exchange goods, and just take a breather before heading back into the wild. They were usually spaced about 20 to 30 miles apart, which, you guessed it, is roughly the distance a loaded camel caravan could cover in a single day. These structures featured massive fortified walls just to keep the bandits out. Inside the courtyard, it was a totally different world. Merchants from a dozen different nationalities mingling around evening fires, watering their animals, swapping intelligence about the road ahead, and bartering their goods.
Next up, Section 4. Exchanging ideas and culture. The ultimate legacy of the routes.
And this brilliantly illustrates a massive turning point. You see, physical survival and the trading material goods paved the way for something way more profound. While tangible cargo like spices and glass moved in chests, this incredible intangible cargo was moving in the minds of the travelers. We're talking traveling scholars, monks, and merchants carrying religions, brand new technologies, different languages, art, and groundbreaking scientific knowledge. Buddhism traveled out of northern India, weaving its way right through the mountain passes into Han China and eventually all the way to Japan. Islam spread like wildfire from the Arabian Peninsula into Central Asia along these exact same arteries. And meanwhile, world-altering Chinese inventions, things like paper-making, the magnetic compass, and gunpowder, slowly made their monumental journey westward.
So, in these bustling trading cities, travelers weren't just swapping silk for glass. Manuscripts and complex astronomical instruments were literally changing hands. This created a space where diverse ancient cultures could meet, blend, and really learn from one another. Cosmopolitan hubs like Samarkand and Kashgar became these world-renowned centers of learning. Ancient Greek philosophies were translated into Arabic, preserving them for centuries before they ever made their way to European scholars. And artistic styles totally merged. It gave birth to really unique forms, like Gandharan art, where you'd see a Buddhist figure wearing Greco-Roman togas. Basically, these routes created an ancient internet, a massive, continent-spanning network of shared knowledge, just moving at the speed of a camel caravan.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Mongol Peak to Maritime Decline, the rise and fall of the overland web.
Looking at the timeline, pre-13th century, these overland trade routes were honestly pretty fractured. You had different regional powers constantly charging heavy taxes at every single border crossing. But then, the 13th century brought the age of the Mongols. Mongol rule unified massive stretches of this Eurasian network under one single political system, an era we call the Pax Mongolica. They heavily policed the roads, making them so safe and connected that people used to say a maiden carrying a pot of gold could walk from one end of the empire to the other completely unharmed. But, as we know, things change. In subsequent centuries, maritime technologies like the astrolabe and much better ship designs advanced. European navigators started sailing directly around Africa and straight across the Indian Ocean. Ships could carry a massive amount of cargo way faster, completely bypassing those overland middlemen. And so, slowly but surely, the old overland networks started to fade from their central role in global trade.
But even as the caravans eventually stopped, their impact remained deeply embedded in the cultures they touched. There's a quote from our source material that perfectly hits the nail on the head. The Silk Road was never just a road. It was one of history's greatest connections between civilizations. You can still see the genetic, linguistic, and culinary footprints of this network all across Asia and Europe today. Those crumbling ruins of remote caravanserais, they represent an absolutely incredible legacy of human resilience, curiosity, and enterprise that fundamentally shaped the architecture of our modern world. Which leaves us with a final thought for you to consider. How does modern globalization, our internet, our massive cargo ships, instant communication, and global supply chains, how does it really compare to this ancient web of survival, trade, and ideas? We might move a whole lot faster today, and sure, our cargo looks vastly different, but the foundational blueprint of our connected world was drafted across thousands of miles, step by agonizing step, centuries ago. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history that built our world.